The Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura, California, presents a homily by our minister, the Reverend Dana Worsnop, titled The Best Worst Form of Government, recorded on Sunday morning, October 18th, 2020.
Good morning and welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura and the Unitarian Universalist of San Luis Obispo, the Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Goleta, and the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. When we come together this way on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube, we have been so far this month a congregation of well over 500 and sometimes I think approaching 600. It has been a wildly affirming of the depth and breadth of our tradition throughout our beautiful part of the California coast. I am the Reverend Dana Worsnop, minister here in Ventura, and I am joined this morning by the Reverend Julia Hamilton of Santa Barbara and the Reverend Rod Richards from San Luis Obispo. Live Oaks minister, the Reverend Tamara Casanova Suzuki, gets this Sunday off. We are so happy here in Ventura to host this service for all of us. And there are a whole host of folks who have collaborated to bring this service into being. Here is the lineup of our entire tech team. Today, our director is Brian Fortune, assistant director is Kitty Merrill, our magician is Kent Brinkmeyer, and our tech support human is Joe Osborne. His name says tech support at the beginning on his screen. And while the whole group chat is turned off for everyone, all of us can message each other privately. So do that with Joe if you have any need for assistance. The on-screen people will introduce themselves as we go along. And I just wanted to share a few words about our crew member, our tech crew member, who we call a magician. We have been using images in worship here in Ventura for quite a while. And years ago, some clever ones decided to call it media and graphics in the congregation, or magic. And that part of our services has adapted well to this new format, and we're happy to share that with you. It is so good to be together as a whole flock, a gaggle, a pod, a pack, a pride of Unitarian Universalists. Let us enter this expansive, sacred space.
I am Worship Associate Krista Mendelson. We hope that everyone here has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let us all light our chalices together.
Good morning, all. I am Rod Richards. I am proud and pleased to serve as the minister of our San Luis Obispo congregation. I am grateful for my colleagues, and I am so happy to be with you all today. We begin our service with these words from Trappist monk Thomas Merton from his 1967 book, Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. We are living in the greatest revolution in history. A huge spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not the revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been in humanity. A revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm Music Director Carolyn Bierke, and I'd like to welcome you all. Please join me in singing our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fidelity, and I'm the Religious Education Coordinator here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura. I'm sure you've noticed that the world is a complete mess these days. November 3rd looms. Millions of acres of California have burned in 2020 alone, and lives continue to be lost each day due to coronavirus disease and police brutality. Yet, we know that there is a light of hope to be had in the darkness, and so many people out there fighting for justice. For our Time for the Child in each of us today, we'll be considering those who help handle some of these crises, messes, and difficulties. Please enjoy Good People Everywhere by Linnea Gillen, illustrated by Christina Sforner. Today, in neighborhoods all over the world, millions and millions of people are doing very good things. Today, carpenters are building fences and houses and repairing homes that have been damaged by storms. Today, parents and guardians and aunts and uncles are cooking dinners for their families, and cooks are working in kitchens, making meals for people who don't have homes. Doctors and midwives are delivering babies and gently passing them into the eager arms of their parents. Teachers are teaching math, spelling, and reading skills. Musicians are opening their hearts and playing beautiful music. And dancers are leaping across dance floors, practicing performances that will bring joy to their friends, their families, and their communities. Today, people are planting seeds, picking fruits and vegetables, and driving them to grocery stores all around the world so that you can have a ripe, juicy orange in your lunchbox. Today, a child is trying her very best to do well on her science test, and a teenage boy is helping a young child who is sad and lonely. Today, a first grade boy is helping a friend who has a skinned knee. And a big sister is holding her baby brother while her mother runs across the street to go help a neighbor. Today, millions and millions of people will do very good things. And so will you. I wonder, what will you do? My mom always brings up the quote by Mr. Rogers when I'm scared or uncertain. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, Mr. Rogers says, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. So yes, our world is messy and complicated and often quite terrible, and it always will be. Yet every time we choose to do something nice or creative or generous, like fixing a fence or cooking a meal, we are also slowly but surely cleaning up these messes. Linnea Gillen reminds us in Good People Everywhere that piece by piece and bit by bit, we can turn all this chaos into something just a bit more manageable.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the Reverend Julia Hamilton, and it is my honor to serve as the lead minister at the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. And I'm here because we are networking ourselves together on the Central Coast this October. And I know that our congregational networks extend far beyond just the community that is gathered with us this morning. The generosity of each of you that supports the work of your local congregation also supports the work of the partnerships that your congregation make in your community and beyond. Each of our congregations has an outreach partner that we give away a portion of our offering toward. Each congregation has our own way of doing it, but this month is no exception. Part of the offerings that we gather this month go towards supporting those relationships that extend beyond the walls of our community. In this time when we are gathering together, those networks of support and inspiration and resilience are more important than ever. So we have the links here for each of our congregations giving. We're going to put them up on the screen, and they're also going to go in the chat. And I encourage you to follow the link for your local congregation and to give as generously as you are able, knowing that your work not only supports the work of Unitarian Universalist communities like ours, but goes farther than that and works to build our values in the world, to build those relationships in our communities that support and sustain so many people, and help us all as we look towards a more beloved community. Thank you for your generosity. And while you go ahead and follow those links, we have some marvelous music this morning by Ventura Congregation's Ball family, Tom, Jill, Sarah, and Emily.
you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up, you girls and boys? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up and use your voice? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up, you girls and boys? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up and use your voice? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up, you girls and boys? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up and use your voice? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up, you girls and boys? Won't you stand up, stand up, stand up? Won't you stand up and use your voice?
Thank you, Ball family. Woo. We are, excuse me, we are grateful for the generosity of these four congregations. There is a generous spirit woven through this tapestry of love we call community. Let us now recognize some of the great joys and sorrows in our lives. We see this image of ripples in water to symbolize the celebrations and sorrows in our hearts, which are felt throughout our community. This morning, our community extends to include all four of our congregations. Though the ripples are virtual, we know the connections we feel are real. I invite you now to stay muted and take some moments to speak aloud in your own spaces the names of those you wish to celebrate or memorialize, or those in need of the loving embrace of this beloved community. By invoking their names, we include them in the circle of caring we create. May we be truly grateful for all that is our life.
Please join me in singing together, "We Would Be One." We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Our reading this morning is from Frederick Douglass in 1857. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
I want to invite you into a time of meditation. Now, I know the words of Frederick Douglass hardly seemed geared toward quiet reflection or serene contemplation. Struggle, agitation, thunder and lightning, the awful roar of the oceans, demanding, resisting, words and blows. And yet this struggle for justice can only come from the quiet center of our beings. If we want a new world to grow, we must know the ground we are to plow. If we are seeking to protect and honor the lives of the most vulnerable, we would do well to acquaint ourselves with that which sustains our own lives, breathing in peace, breathing out love. So for these few moments, be with your breath, feeling it move in and through you, and then out into the world. Feel the chair, the floor, the ground beneath you, the sturdiness of the earth itself, holding your precious lives. Notice the love that lies at the center of your beings, and offer it up to the world.
Our special music today is We Americans by the Avett Brothers. It is sung and played by Andy Edgar Beltran and Evan Austin, or as we in Ventura know them, I've Seen Better Elephants.
I grew up with reverence for the red, white, and blue. Spoke of God and liberty, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Learned love of country from my own family. Some shivered and prayed, approaching the beaches of Normandy. flag waves high, and that's how it should be. So many lives given and taken in the name of freedom. But the story's complicated and hard to read. Pages of the book obscured or torn out completely. I am a son of Uncle Sam, and I struggle to understand the good and evil, but I'm doing the best I can in a place built on stolen land with stolen people. Blood in the soil with the cotton and tobacco. Blood in the soil with the cotton and tobacco. Blood in the soil with the cotton and tobacco.
A misnamed people and a kidnapped race. Laws may change, but we can't erase the scars of a nation. Of children devalued and disavowed, displaced by greed and the arrogance of manifest destiny. Short-sighted to say it was a long time ago. Not even 2 lifetimes have passed since the days of Lincoln. The sins of Andrew Jackson, the shame of Jim Crow, and time moves slow and the tragedies are beyond description. I am a son of Uncle Sam, and I struggle to understand the good and evil, but I'm doing the best I can in a place built on stolen land with stolen people. We are more than the sum of our parts. All these broken homes and broken hearts. God, will you keep us wherever we go? Will you forgive us for where we've been? We Americans. Blood on the table with the coffee and the sugar. Blood on the table with the coffee and the sugar. Blood on the table with the coffee and the sugar. I've been to every state and seen shore to shore the still open wounds of the Civil War. Watched blind hatred bounce back and forth. Seen vile prejudice both in the South and the North. And accountability is hard to impose on ghosts of ancestors haunting the halls of our conscience. But the path of grace and goodwill is still here for those of us who may be considered among the living. I am a son of God and man, and I may never understand the good and evil, but I dearly love this land because of and in spite of we the people. We are more than the sum of our parts. All these broken bones and broken hearts. God, will you keep us wherever we go? Can you forgive us for where we've been? We Americans. We Americans. Love in our hearts with the pain and the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain and the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain and the memory. in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory. Love in our hearts with the pain in the memory.
Okay. That has given me chills every time I have read it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, dear elephants. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that the universe always tends toward disorder. It is always falling apart, dispersing, fundamentally a mess. It is in a general state of chaos, interrupted by well-spaced conglomerations of order, like suns and planets, and in our case, people and mitochondria. Entropy is the nature of the universe. And this is also essentially the foundational insight of Gautama Buddha, writes the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. The notion of impermanence was the initial insight that impelled the Buddha to leave the palace in search of enlightenment. Impermanence comprises the totality of conditioned existence. It ranges from the cosmic to the microscopic. The Buddha's vision reveals a universe of immense dimensions, evolving and disintegrating in repetitive cycles. This entropy, this impermanence, is what makes a desk, once beautifully tidied up, revert to chaos again in a matter of days or hours or even minutes, depending on the situation. And yes, that is a picture of my very own desk at the church 2 years ago. I was so proud of that moment. That when it was so tidy, I posted a picture of it on Facebook. And I promised it has not looked quite like that since. But the news is not all bad, astrophysicist Adam Frank assures us. Yes, your efforts to tidy up that desk are doomed to a kind of ultimate failure. Yet the very act of trying is what defines being alive. Even more, it's that act of trying that makes life, your life in particular, a cosmic victory. Life is order hammered out, if only for a time. And with that effort, something new, something wonderful appears in the universe. Creativity. Another thing that brings order to chaos are simple acts of kindness, like those in the story Fidelity read this morning. Entropy is always trying to trip us up. Entropy conspires with gravity, I think. And we skin our knees metaphorically and sometimes literally. And we heal the wounds of entropy with a dollop of kindness. All life, all art, all kindness is an effort to bring order, and yes, often beauty and truth into the world. None of it is forever, and yet it is glorious while it lasts. Democracy, as a human creation, is inherently messy. It's inherently flawed, as the song We Americans just reminded us. And yet our democracy is an attempt to create a semblance of order in our collective lives, an order that embraces the dignity of each human voice and experience. Or at least that is our goal, that is our ideal, that is what we keep trying to do. Democracy does not create a well-ordered society where the trains run on time. It does, however, give people a say in how we are governed. It is messier than, say, dictatorship, precisely because it is a fully human institution that relies on the free expression of many human voices. And we have seen how messy it can become in our lifetimes. Winston Churchill is often slightly misquoted as saying, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. A deeper Google search brings up his actual words. Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. There are others who have suggested that a benevolent dictatorship would actually be the ideal form of government. And yet, how well we know that dictatorships do not stay benevolent, either because power corrupts even the most benevolent, or because the most benevolent all do eventually die. And benevolence is far more a personal rather than an institutional quality. And so here we are, left with democracy. The best, worst, the worst, best form of government. Democracy, which is enshrined in our principles as Unitarian Universalists. As you use our commitment to deliberating and voting on our spiritual affairs grows out of the New England tradition that produced town meetings. The Reverend Gary Kowalski writes, Thomas Jefferson called the town meeting the wisest invention ever devised by the wit of man for the perfect exercise of self-government and for its preservation. Though Kowalski points out it is unlikely that Virginian Jefferson ever actually attended one. John Adams a Unitarian from Massachusetts and far more familiar with the practice, Kowalski continues, knew far better the often messy realities of town and congregational meetings. In his parish, Adams Parish of Braintree, these gatherings could become so heated that early in the 18th century, a rule was passed to stop people from standing up in their pews and shouting at each other. What a glorious mess we create when we undertake this practice of democracy. Democracy is both messy and oft misunderstood. It starts with the sacred franchise to vote, yet voting is only a part of what makes democracy. For our democracy, in the First Amendment, enshrines the freedom of religion, the press, and speech. It protects the right of free assembly and of protest. Those 5 rights are necessary for democracy to thrive. And we well know, both from history and the present, that such speech and assemblies and protests can be very messy. Now, it is very easy for all of us to fall into the trap of thinking that we should always have direct democracy when everyone gets to vote on everything. And this idea often arises when people disagree with a decision made by elected officials acting within their authority, or if the church board makes a decision they disagree with. Direct democracy is absolutely sometimes just what we need. And yet far more often, we are a representative democracy. We vote for the people who make the laws, not on the laws themselves, though the complicated and messy process of ballot initiatives in California notwithstanding. A messy example of what I thought was good democratic process arose over a dispute over the statue of Father Junipero Serra in front of the Ventura City Hall. The statue honors the colonial narrative of the settling of California. Yet for many, especially those of Chumash heritage, it is a painful reminder of genocide and lost ancestors. People of Chumash heritage have brought up their pain again and again, and asked again and again that something be done about this statue. And yet their pain was minimized and dismissed. Junipero Serra is a figure in a complex history that paved the way for many of us to be here where we are right now. A path paved also by colonization and genocide. This is the wholeness of our history that Evan and Andy sang about. Even as we dearly love this land, we know, even that it is built on broken promises and cruel intent. And yet, we are greater than the sum of our parts. Now, this spring, when statues of Confederate generals became flashpoints of protest, the duly elected mayor of Ventura, Matt Levere, got proactive. He invited Father Thomas Elowat of Mission San Buenaventura and tribal chair Julie Tumamet Stensile, and I'm not sure that I got any of those names quite right. He invited them both into a conversation. They talked for 4 hours, an act of courage in our divided times. And yet, for all of that courage, the mayor got a rasher of grief. This was undemocratic, people cried. How dare he take it upon himself to sit down with the stakeholders involved and work out a compromise? People demanded that the council put it to a vote of the people. The city council did hold 2 multi-hour meetings, giving everyone a chance to speak. I chose to send them a letter. I wrote, in part, when I saw the statue of Father Sarah on my first visit to Ventura, my heart sank. For the statue dishonors the first peoples of this land, telling only one side of a multi-layered history. And in telling only one side of that history, it disrespects all of us, though most especially the Chumash peoples who have been marginalized and silenced for years. I ask that the council accept the agreement made by the 2 most direct stakeholders. I also asked them to please resist putting this on a ballot to a vote of all the people. For making such controversial decisions, I said, is part of your responsibility in this representative democracy. The voice of the people most directly harmed can so easily be drowned out, essentially silencing them once more. That would simply compound the damage already caused and do nothing to address the deeper issues, which won't just somehow go away. Moving the statue, I concluded, does not erase history. Rather, it teaches us a more complete history. This was messy democracy in action. I have heard from reports of people who were at those multi-hour meetings that the sentiment of the people was about 60-40 in favor of removing the statue. And I am happy to report that the city council voted unanimously to move the statue of Junipero Serra to the grounds of the Mission San Buenaventura. In these times, now, when our democracy is fraying, chaotic, and even feeling seriously endangered, it is still a gift that democracy reflects our humanity at its best, and alas, too often at its worst. And yet democracy is still beautiful and fragile and worthy of our devotion. At its best, we create a new thing out of disorder, taking our most solid values, piling them up, finding the keystone, leaning in, and trusting. Creating a new thing in the world, not something that ever can be static and forever, and yet something beautiful and precious. And this democracy, our democracy that we love so much, that we work to defend, that we worry about losing, it too was forged in revolution, and it too has survived many upheavals, including the revolution that Thomas Burton spoke of in the 1960s, what he called a huge spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race, a deep elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been in humanity, a revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. It also survived the great upheaval foreshadowed powerfully by Frederick Douglass in 1857. Democracy, Douglass told us, is not only messy, it actually requires struggle against injustice, against the forces of entropy. If there is no struggle, there is no progress, he said. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet deprecate agitation, are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. And here we are again in another time of upheaval where our democracy is again threatened. It seems that Frederick Douglass had to have been on to something beyond his own time, because his words still speak to us across centuries. He said, "Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted, either with words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." Yet this is also the way of democracy, Kowalski reminds us. Vigorous debate is essential to democracy, he says, and fireworks are certainly a part of our revolutionary tradition. Democracy is not supposed to be tame or tidy or tepid. Good thing, because it's just not. Democracy is not just about voting, though that is simply the most critical blow we can strike for justice and freedom right now. So I actually beg you, I ask you fervently, please, please, please vote now, or tomorrow, or really, really soon if you haven't already. and do all that you can. And I know we all have been doing so much to encourage others to vote. And I hope you find both challenge and comfort and encouragement this morning. Democracy is inherently messy, and ours is especially so right now. And democracy, this democracy we love, has broken bones and broken hearts. And yet we love this country because of and in spite of we the people. We dearly love this land. This democracy we so love has survived upheaval and fireworks before. It can do it now too. The most serious threat to our democracy actually came to physical blows in less than a century after we had the whole thing got started. Yet let our blows now be metaphorical at the ballot box, in our protests, in the letters we write. Democracy will always ask us, demand of us to resist tyranny. And that will be, as Frederick Douglass told us, too often a struggle. Asking people to vote, to cast a ballot reflecting their values will never be entirely orderly. And yet democracy is still the best, worst form of government we have managed to create out of the chaos around us. So please speak your mind, go out and protest when you need to amplify your voice, and follow the lead of Scout the Wonder Dog and vote. Amen. May it be so. I invite you now to join me in prayer. Holy beingness of many names and no name, mystery beyond all naming, spirit of life and love and justice, which dwells within and among and beyond us this day and always. May we keep our hearts open even as they are breaking open. May we live with the knowledge of a history that carries with it much pain and injustice, which carries in it too much nobility, many voices standing up, speaking out for what is good and better, who strive for a more perfect union, knowing that it will never be perfect. May we know that this democracy too often has broken bones and far too frequently breaks our hearts. And yet, may we hold in our hearts our love for this land and our commitment to building a more nobler world, than we have yet known. And may all those who are ill find healing. May those who are in despair find hope. May those who are without shelter find home. And may all those suffering in conflict and war throughout the world, may they and we know peace. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join me in singing our closing hymn, The Fire of Commitment. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then the promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the story's youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Please join Reverend Dana in extinguishing your chalice at home. We extinguish the chalice, but not the light in our hearts, the warmth of community, or the assurance and goodness we have found here. Those we carry into our lives until we gather again.
It has been so wonderful to share our worship services with each other, noting and learning from the differences and seeing how alike we are. It is so good to be together. Now that we have extinguished our chalices and after the benediction, we will once again go into Zoom rooms for coffee social hour. We have so far mostly been joining our own congregations, though I invite everyone to feel free to show up in whatever room you like. Though the links will be posted after the benediction and after the service. And maybe we can get to know each other even better. I leave you with words from the Reverend Wayne Arneson that are likely familiar to all, certainly to the people of Ventura, and particularly fitting as we are gathered across 4 congregations. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go forth in love. Go forth in peace. Go forth in good health. Go forth and vote. May it be so.
We hope you've enjoyed The Best Worst Form of Government, presented by the Reverend Dana Worsnop, recorded on October 18th, 2020, for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura, California.